13 major injuries and then some guys that we're going to monitor. But let's start with Deshaun Watson. He has a shoulder injury, could possibly return this week against the 49ers. I did see that he did not practice today. So what is the status of Deshaun Watson?
Just absolutely confusing reporting, and I'm going to do my best to read between the lines here because there are a lot of lines that need to be read through. His injury was week 3, right? So that's almost 4 weeks now. It's being reported initially as a rotator cuff contusion. A contusion's a bruise. So in the first week or two, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. He could have a bruise in the rotator cuff muscles at that point. He's not going to still have a bruise 4 weeks later. Now, we're getting more detailed reports. It's a subscapularis muscle deep bruise. So the subscapularis is one of the 4 rotator cuff muscles, sits on the front side of the shoulder blade, attaches into the humerus, which is the arm bone. And its job is, well, one, all the rotator cuff muscles hold the arm bone in the shoulder socket when the arm goes overhead, like in throwing. So it kind of suctions it up in there. And then the subscapularis in particular helps transition the arm from the cockback phase to the follow-through phase. So it brings the arm forward and across the body. So an injury there, which I am now interpreting this as just a straight up subscapularis tendon injury. Forget the contusion. It would not still be bruised 4 weeks later. So he has a rotator cuff injury to the subscapularis muscle. So that's going to make it hard to do that forceful throwing. But here's where there's another layer there. Very rarely, I've seen this once ever clinically, is the subscap muscle injured on its own. It's very hard for that muscle to get injured, or muscle or tendon to get injured without other stuff also getting injured. So this is telling me that he probably has injury to multiple rotator cuff muscles or tendons. That's going to sound worse, though, to a lot of people than it could be. Sure, a lot of people with rotator cuff injuries end up getting surgery, about a 6-month rehab that would end his season. But so many people don't get surgery. They just rehab it, and they can get back to full strength, no pain, full function. And for football players in particular, a lot of times they'll rehab it and just kind of play with it through the season and then get surgery in the offseason. With Watson, there's no indications that his season is shutting down at this point. But we do need to just be kind of careful here and ensure that he is given the time to rehab this before coming back and playing. Doesn't sound like he's on track so far to play this week. Whenever he does play, I would not start him that first week because we want to see how that shoulder's looking before we put him back in our lineups, especially because he's really like a fringe QB1, QB2. So I don't think this is means to go and drop him, but we do need to be careful here. We need to be cautious. If he plays this week, we hold him out of our lineups.
Wow. That was a lot of lines to read in between, Tom, and scapula hupahaka and all these muscles. It made sense to me, though. So thank you for making that make sense to me. And you're right. I mean, Watson, I did have some hopes for this year, but he hasn't played since week 3. Browns are miraculously somehow 3-2. They shocked the 49ers in week 5. I think they're coming off a bye this week, right? The Browns are. No, was it last week that they shocked them?
Yeah, they just beat them.
Yeah, last week, week 6. So 19-7, which was crazy. And the Browns have struggled in the passing game. I mean, right now it's to PJ Walker, who's respectable, I guess. But Browns right now, offensively, just fantasy standpoint wise, they're 30th in passing yards. Now this week, I don't think you're looking to play PJ Walker, but just for the Browns options, they do have a pretty soft matchup. Let's see, they have, options, I guess, for the Browns players are limited, but, overall, Jerome Ford looks pretty strong, 17 for 84 and 2 catches. Hunt's usage has been decent. And I think Cooper still, although he's been inconsistent, I still consider him to be a viable but risky flex play. But options limited there for that offense as a whole. The Browns play the Colts this week, like we said, a pretty soft matchup passing-wise. But we'll see if Watson does return. Okay. On to Trevor Lawrence. Tom, he hasn't, I don't know if this is a new knee injury, and also the fact that he plays tomorrow or today, depending on when you're listening, but him and the Jags passing attack hasn't looked the same as they've looked in the past and have we expected them to look. But what's going on with Trevor Lawrence?
Well, we saw towards the end of the game, he was running. I think he was rolling out to the left side, got tackled, and his knee, he came up with a left knee injury. But if you really look at the video, his knee didn't undergo any type of motion or displacement that would really stress any of the major structures in there. So from the video there right away, I knew there wasn't anything major going on. And then we get more video later of him walking into the locker room. And he had a little bit of a limp where you saw his weight shifts a little bit more to the left side when that left leg is in stance. And that's a very common gait compensation when there's a injury to either the knee or the ankle on that side, where it's really more of a pain thing versus a true full-blown injury. So from those two videos, really in the moment on Sunday, you could tell this wasn't going to be anything major, and that's really how it sounds. It's a very minor knee sprain. If it wasn't a Thursday night game, I would have literally no concerns at all. He still could be dealing with some swelling, some pain, some stiffness. But again, this is his left leg. It's not his right leg. So as a right-handed quarterback, pushes off the right leg for power. That's not going to be a problem. He might just not be able to move around quite as well. But I think that if he suits up Thursday night, there's not enough here for me to take him out of my lineup. I would still play him.
Fair enough. I mean, hopefully it is enough rest. Again, unfortunately, he does have that early Thursday night game against the Saints. Listen, as a whole, Jags look okay, man. They look pretty good. I mean, they go to England or London and they win 2 games over there, but they're 4-2. They're sitting atop the AFC South right now. Jags offensively right now, 12th in total yards, 16th in total defense. So they're mediocre statistically. But, Tom, the Jags have beat the Bills. They beat the Colts twice, who are okay. Lost by only 1 score to the Chiefs. Like, they've been all right. They're getting by, man. But bad news is Lawrence, from a fantasy standpoint, hasn't been great. And, Tom, we talked preseason about Lawrence. Like, you and me both had him top 6, top 7. Like, I still think he's that caliber guy. But, yeah, right now, QB 15, averaging just 14.7 points per game. So, hopefully, brighter days from a fantasy perspective for Trevor Lawrence, but the Jags look pretty good. And the rest of their weapons, I mean, Christian Kirk continues to be extremely reliable. Tom, looked at his numbers, man. Since week 2, half-point PPR, Christian Kirk, 16.5, 13.4, 12.4, 11.4, 12.4. Insanely consistent, man. He's been good. Ridley, a little disappointing. Tom, you talked about how he's kind of running into some bad luck, but getting the targets, not cashing in. And ETN, man, like, it's been a rough year for me, man. I'm going to keep powering through. I'm going to keep doing my research, keep providing you stuff. I kind of faded ETN aggressively. That's a swing and a miss for me, but he's RB3 right now. Been absolutely freaking piping, back-to-back massive games. But Tom, quickly, is Lawrence startable? I mean, of course it depends on your options, but maybe you have, I don't know, Brock Purdy on your team. Maybe you're looking at like Stafford. Like, would you play Lawrence this week? I mean, kind of a tough matchup against the Saints. I think they're 5th in the league in passing yards, even though they haven't played good competition. But what do you think about Lawrence for this week, at least?
It is a tough matchup, but yeah, I do really believe in Trevor Lawrence in this offense. And then, I mean, keep in mind, the first 2 guys we've talked about here, the next guy we're going to talk about, quarterbacks. That was the theme of the injuries this week. It was so many quarterbacks got injured. Yep. And then we're also in bye territory now. So in a vacuum, is Trevor Lawrence a set it and forget it QB1? Maybe not. But given the circumstances with guys like Justin Fields injured, I don't know off the top of my head who's on bye, but there's a couple byes this week. It's definitely, he's a guy that I think will be started around most fantasy leagues this week, and for good reason.
Yeah, fair enough. There's a lot of injuries we'll talk later about, and we've already talked about a couple, but you have Carolina, that's somewhat irrelevant. Joe Burrow's on a bye. Dak Prescott's on a bye. CJ Stroud, if you were playing him. Jets, I don't think so. Tennessee on a bye. So, yeah, I mean, it could be a good option. I still feel good about him. Maybe just not to be a top 5 quarterback. All right. Next guy, Tom, Justin Fields, a dislocated right thumb. What do you have on him? Bad news because I got him everywhere too, man. But what do you got for Fields?
This is the type of injury that the news that we're hearing out of Chicago is actually really positive because this could end up needing surgery, could have ended up needing surgery. Whenever there's a dislocation, there's pretty much always ligament damage as well. And the extent of the ligament damage is going to contribute to instability of that joint, meaning it could dislocate again and again and again and again. With everything we're hearing out of Chicago, I have not heard surgery once. So that tells me that the ligament injury isn't so severe that he can't regain the stability and be just fine. So what he needs to do in order to play again is get pain and swelling down, which is going to influence range of motion, get that full range of motion back, and then get grip strength back. This is an injury I've seen numerous times clinically, and typically it's about 2 to 4 weeks to accomplish all those things. With Fields being younger than some of the people I've seen this in, and an elite athlete who with access to round the clock treatment, like multiple hours every day, we could see him back more on that two week side. But I would expect somewhere between that 2 and 4. We'll see. And I think he'll be able to play well. Will his accuracy be off in that first game? Maybe, because we don't know if they send him back on the field with truly 100% of that grip strength,
right,
or is it still a little bit weaker? We don't know. We've seen Russell Wilson struggle when he comes back from finger and thumb injuries. I believe Dak Prescott struggled a little bit as well. So sometimes that first game for a passer is a little bit of a struggle, but you can definitely hang on to Justin Fields to make that fantasy playoff run. I think a month from now, he'll be pretty much 100%.
I hope so. He's been progressing, not perfect this year. I mean, the Bears are only 1-5. I'm definitely hoping to see him back. I could see them not rushing him back because he probably is their franchise guy. But the poor get poorer, Tom. This is going to be really tough for them. And the guy who steps in, man, another name who I saw on Red Zone and on ESPN, who I never heard of before, Tyson Bagent is going to be stepping in here, Tom. I am not disrespecting him at all. My man was serviceable. He looked pretty good, and I hope that he does do well this week. Tom, I don't think you would know this. Any clue where he played his college ball? Actually, what a silly question, because I don't even know if the school is real. He played for Shepherd University, Tom, in West Virginia. He played for the Shepherd Rams, a D2 team with, here we go, with roughly 3,000 total students. My high school, for perspective, has 2,800 students. This guy played. I saw a funny tweet today. Hold on. So this past December, Tyson Bagent threw 2 interceptions and was sacked 8 times against a school called Colorado School of Mines. He will face the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday. Oh, what a story.
I've actually heard of Colorado School of Mines. I don't know why. Maybe I was watching that game, but that is very interesting.